Hi everyone, Erica Desper of Confident Parenting, and I help families get more sleep. Today I wanted to spend some time talking about the top reasons that your child may not have slept last night. And reason number one is that bedtime is too late. And I already know what you're thinking. It's the earliest we can get bedtime. It's the perfect bedtime. My child falls asleep so quickly and easily. I don't want to change it. But if you're struggling with frequent night waking, I would encourage you to stop and consider whether bedtime may be falling a little too late for your child. Let's talk for a minute about what I mean by too late. The bedtime that you've settled on for your little one might be perfect for you. It might be perfect with your work schedule. It might fit really well with their siblings' bedtimes. But what I really mean by too late is bedtime falling too late on the clock compared to what your child's body thinks that it needs. We all have an internal clock, and that clock kind of dictates around what times we should feel sleepy and what times we should wake up. And when bedtime gets pushed a little bit past what your child's internal clock is really programmed for, you can easily run into lots of sleep struggles. Parents get really confused when I tell them that they need to try moving bedtime earlier, and they say, my child falls asleep really quickly and easily. There's no struggle at all. I don't want to mess with that. Sometimes it's not always a good thing that your child's falling asleep in a flash. It could mean that they're too tired, and what happens is number one, they aren't really going through the motions of moving themselves from awake to asleep, and that's going to cause some problems in the sleep cycle transitions that they have overnight. Number two, when the body senses that it's growing a little overtired, it kind of kicks into overdrive and it says to itself, uh-oh, I've been up a little too long, I'm up a little too late, I need to do something about this, I need to find a way to keep going. And your child's body, in response to that feeling, will pump out a bunch of hormone that kind of runs around the system. And even if they can get past that and fall asleep, you're going to see the effects of that kind of rearing its ugly head throughout the night. It's important to note that none of us actually sleep through the night. If you think back to before you had your little ones and you thought that you slept through the night, we actually all wake up briefly throughout the night when we're transitioning from one set of sleep cycles to another, and each of those transitions is an opportunity to pop awake. So if your little one was just a tad too tired when they fell asleep at bedtime, or maybe very overtired when they fell asleep at bedtime because it fell too late on the clock, that process is going to kind of rear its ugly head at each or many of the sleep cycle transitions that fall throughout the night. So that is how you can reach a place where bedtime is easy and breezy and the overnight is really, really crummy. And that is what I mean by too late. So what if it doesn't seem like bedtime is too late for your child? What if they're acting perfectly normal leading up to bedtime? They're not crying, they're not fussy, they're not clingy, which is awesome. It is still possible that bedtime is a little too late. A lot of the kids that I work with, think about how you would describe your child. Would you say that they're kind of easygoing and pleasant and social, very, very distractible maybe when it's time to eat? They don't really like to stop and slow down what they're doing. That's awesome. It's wonderful that you have a pleasant, easygoing child. However, in my experience, those types of children are the children that kind of won't let you know if things aren't falling in the right place for them. They'll just say, I'm fine, I'm easy, and I'm pleasant, remember? And they don't really let you know that things aren't lined up perfectly. The only way that you will know are the repercussions that you're seeing. It's not really going so well. So keep in mind that a child who has gone past their sweet spot for bedtime will not always let you know loud and clear. They could be looking and acting perfectly fine, and you could still have an issue with where bedtime is falling. So not all overtired children look overtired. So how do you figure out if bedtime is falling too late? One way you might know is that you're having a lot of night waking, or that your child is waking too early the following morning. This really blows parents' minds when they come to me with a child who's waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. And the way that I help them fix that is to move bedtime earlier. And they panic. Well, if I move bedtime earlier, then my child's going to wake even earlier than 4 or 5 a.m. I can't guarantee that won't happen, but what I can say is it almost never happens. Usually we move bedtime earlier and we get a better, later wake time the following morning. So if your child is waking up throughout the night and ready to party and start the day at 4 or 5 a.m., you may have a bedtime clock problem. That's one way that you might know. If your child's falling asleep in a flash the second that their head hits the pillow, that's another way that you might know. Most of us take a little while to kind of go from awake to asleep. Maybe it takes us 5 or 10 minutes. Some of us it takes a little bit longer. So out in a flash is a good way that you might know that your child is overtired. And certainly if they really can't make it through the bedtime process, the bedtime routine, they're kind of falling apart, they don't want to read their books, they're asking to go into their crib or their bed, those sorts of things. But again, not all children are going to do that. So how might you determine a better bedtime if you think that bedtime is falling too late? That's a little bit trickier. Lots of people are probably watching this and all the answers would be different depending on your child. But one great way to try to figure it out is to find out how much total sleep your child needs overnight. Most of the little ones that I work with between 6 months and 2 years, that's the bulk of children that I'm working with, they need around 11 hours, give or take maybe 30 minutes in either direction. And not to say that some are not interrupted throughout those 11 hours to eat once or twice. But let's say that you think your child needs 11 hours, or that that's the average for their age. One great way to figure out where bedtime might need to fall is to think about what their average wake time is each morning. If you're a parent, you probably know you can't convince your child to sleep any later than they are. That's kind of programmed in them. So let's say your child is waking up at 6 a.m. naturally every morning. Or let's say that you need your child up at 6 a.m. to get them to school or daycare, whatever it might be. You could count backwards from that time, 11 hours. That child would really need to be asleep probably by 7 p.m. to get 11 hours of sleep. So to use that as an example, if your child isn't asleep until 8 or 8:30, obviously they're not going to be able to get that ideal total, and bedtime is probably falling too late. Another thing that confuses parents is they say, well, like, what if bedtime is 15 minutes too late? What's the big deal? With all we have going on, how specific do I need to be? That really depends on your child. Some kids will give you a little bit of wiggle room. Mine does not, but I'm just lucky that way. If yours does, great. But 15 minutes, even 10 minutes, we really are talking about little bits of timing distinctions that can kind of make or break the night that you're going to have. If you think of each of those little bits of time as a brick, let's think of the game Jenga. Everybody probably knows that game. Take that little 15 to 30 minute block of time and turn it into a Jenga brick. And then from night to night, stack those little bricks on top of each other. You know that over time, as the tower gets taller and taller, it starts to get really wobbly and it crumbles. So sometimes the crumble that we're seeing is all the frequent waking overnight, and we do need to pull the timing in and make it tighter by little bits of time. So reason number one that your child maybe didn't sleep last night, consider whether bedtime is falling too late on the clock. If you think you already have bedtime, you found that sweet spot for bedtime on the clock, then be sure to check back for the next video in the series, reason number 2. And if you can't sort out bedtime on your own, then of course I do work with families privately. We'll figure out where that sweet spot is and get your baby on or child on a schedule that works for them. So feel free to come and find me, and I'll be back soon. Thanks, guys.